Reviewing is a skill. You don't just randomly overnight understand how to review and get it, and then you're a master at it. No, it took me years. It literally took me years to get good at reviewing. Hey everyone, and welcome to another video. Today we're going to be covering reviewing, specifically 7 tips or pieces of advice I would give for improving your review process. Now, number 1, cut the fat. Your job and our job is to identify 20 percenters in the post game. We don't want to be getting into the minutia of mid to late game if there are still 20 percenters left on the table. For example, coming out of lane 25 CS behind in a reasonable matchup is a gigantic problem and is probably one of the core reasons why that game was difficult. If you're dying twice in the first 12 minutes of the game, that is a massive, massive problem. And that is probably one of the major things that we need to take away from the game before getting into the minutiae of the mid to late game. Examples of 20%ers are things such as dying to ganks, support roams, taking a really bad trade and going down multiple waves, losing an early game 2v2, enemy laner roaming and influencing your side lanes, a bad reset, leading to multiple lost waves, getting stuck in lane with no mana, and you maybe can't help at a neutral objective. These are giant problems. These are the big 20%ers that are creating creating your particular game set that you're in. Now, identifying the big fish, this is the skill. This is typically what people kind of overlook. We have a tendency to kind of look at the thing that was the most kind of relevant when coming into the review. For example, there's maybe like a burger flip Baron play at 37 minutes into the game. And maybe you lose the game because your jungler misses spite and you go straight into the review. And most people have the tendency to be like, oh, I should have kept that person out, or I could have been positioning better here, or maybe we should have done this Baron. And we get into the minutia, all the details of this like 37-minute Baron play. And it's like, well, look, guys, yeah, sure, maybe there are things to learn and take away from this. But in reality, is this really what is holding you back? Is this really what is worth directing your attention towards in the review when you come out of lane 30 CS down with 2 deaths by 15 minutes? I don't think so. I think that's the cherry on top. We shouldn't be reviewing the game or overemphasizing those details when you're in a terrible position from the get-go. So one of my major pieces of advice to you guys is always start the reviews sequentially and work your way from the start onwards. You don't really want to fall into the trap of going from the end of the game back to the start, because then you're going to really lose context of what is important. And you're going to start to find yourself getting into details that just have no bearing on why you're at the rank that you're at. This is a skill. It will take time to develop, but it's more of a mindset more than anything. And when you're looking for those big 20%ers, this will really improve the quality of your reviews. Now, moving into zooming in and out. Most people tend to view the game through one of 2 lenses, either through a micro lens or a macro lens. A micro lens is typically maybe more so focusing on the ability usage, the fighting, the mechanics, all of the actual execution of a situation itself. Whereas the macro lens is more the bigger picture. For example, why am I at this play? What else could I have done? Kind of missed opportunities, like opportunity costs. Should we be giving this neutral objective instead of fighting it? Right? These are the sorts of kind of macro questions certain personality types are drawn towards. We need to understand plays through both of these lenses, not just the micro lens, not just the macro lens, both of them. So rather than talking about it, let's go ahead and get into an example of utilizing the micro-macro framework. So here is a chaotic play from one of my recent Way games where I was trying to go into the top river to complement my idiot on the grubs. Like an idiot, I walk into this bush trying to get a ward and face check a Viego. I disengage with my EQ, peel back, narrowly escape with a good quality flash, and just survive. Now, typically, this is where the micro-macro framework comes into play. So you always start with the micro. What could I have done better with my ability usage, my positioning, all that stuff to make this situation a lot better for myself? So from an ability usage perspective, I mean, look, reality, I should have used maybe EW in the bush. I could have used QW in the bush. I could have used QQ. I could have taken precautions, understanding that there is a control ward in here to actually protect myself a lot better, especially since the Viego is out of vision and the support is missing, right? So there are a lot of things I could have done in the way I navigated the situation just from a raw ability usage, positioning, raw fighting aspect, and that would have made my life a hell of a lot easier. Even going for, in my opinion, even going for the WE probably wasn't even that effective. I should have WW'd or even WQ to give my move speed to get out, or WW for the shield, which would have protected myself a lot more reliably. Now, from a macro perspective, now we'll kind of zoom out after we've looked at the micro. I would say, okay, well, is this a good grubs to fight? Well, yeah, I think it is, but I think it's just mainly my positioning that doesn't make it great. I could have actually either hugged this wall, moved over to the neutral objective, made them come into us. I could have, like I said before, used my abilities from a distance to scout, and then maybe look to get some vision later on. But I think fundamentally it's still a good grubs to play for because my Udyr was strong. We had moved from top side. I've got a lot of control from mid lane. I think still fun looking at it from a macro perspective. The macro wasn't really the problem. In my opinion, it was more the micro. So you're going to be in scenarios whereby a lot of people would only look at this through this micro lens and be like, oh, yep, ability usage, this and that. And yeah, cool, there's some great learning. But they wouldn't even second guess the decision itself. They wouldn't even zoom out and ask, well, why am I even here? Is this even a good place to be? Should I even be contesting this neutral objective? We need to, in order to be complete players, we need to be able to look at these scenarios, through both the micro and the macro lens. Set a timer, guys. No review should be going longer than 5 minutes, especially if you are new to reviewing. Now you may ask, well, why? Why is this the case? The key to having success in League is consistency and sustainability. If I told you to sit there and review each and every game for 10, 15 minutes, what's the bet that you're going to give up after a few blocks or a few days or even a week of games? You're going to lose your mind. At the end of the day, reviewing in League is not overly fun. We play League because we just want to kill shit. We want to get that dopamine. We want to see the victory screen or whatever. We don't really want to sit there pumping hours and hours into our reviews. It's just not sustainable. Even if it were theoretically useful, which it's not to review, it's actually not, which we'll get to in a moment. Realistically, it's just not sustainable. So your review process should always be something that you believe to be true, that you believe to be sustainable for you. And I've never seen anyone really, in my opinion, over my entire time coaching, actually have a sustainable review process that actually lasts for a long period of time, over 5 minutes. Now, if your reviews are taking more than 5 minutes, you're either likely reviewing too many things, in which case some of that stuff's going to go way over your head anyway, or you probably don't understand these things well enough to even get value from it in the post game. You're going to be, tweaking away over here, thinking, "Oh, should I've done that? Should I've done that? Should I've done that?" If you're having to go through hula hoops to break down a play, you're probably never going to understand it anyway. And you're probably missing information, and in which case you probably need to get someone else to help look at it, get a friend, whatever, because you're probably not going to get that much value from it. And you'll find yourself getting stuck in the weeds. A lot of people lose perspective. They get so nitty gritty, like, oh, should I have done this, that? So they sit there in a play for 15 minutes trying to break it down. And look, I myself, when I was actually coaching a pro coach a few years ago, you would commonly find teams, they would get stuck reviewing like a dragon play. And I'm sure many of you watching this with your friends in Clash, you would review this game in post game and look at this dragon play, and everyone would chime in, for a few minutes each. And before you know it, you spent 20 minutes looking at this dragon or this rift play or this baron play, and then you don't even know what the hell to walk away with. It's like, well, what's the learning here? It just, you had to do advanced algebra or calculus just to figure out what the hell to do next time. And this is a scenario you're never going to see again. That time was way better off being spent queuing it for another game and just playing another game or just reviewing something else. Moving on to follow emotions. If you are unsure about what to review and you felt, most things went well, use your emotions as a guide. If you felt any of these throughout the game, if you felt confused, lost, anxious, angry, frustrated, well, then this is likely a sign that something wasn't quite right in the game. This is still the main methodology that I use to this day. If I played a game and I'm looking at the review, I'm like, oh yeah, I remember this sequence here where I was stuck in bot. I felt really uncomfortable. I felt really constrained. I felt really limited in what I could do. Okay, chances are I've messed something up. Maybe my lane assignment's wrong. Maybe I was off tempo. Maybe I shoved too many waves. Maybe I hard shoved away when I should have slow built. Usually there's something wrong there. Or maybe this dragon fight felt very uncomfortable. Well, chances are, okay, maybe my positioning was off. Maybe I didn't shove mid before I went into the river. Maybe this was just, not an objective that we should have contested in hindsight. So I use my emotions as a guide, as kind of a signal to help streamline my review process. A lot of people, they I guess, push this whole belief or narrative about kind of being this hyper stoic, logical person. In reality, it's like, League's a competition. It's a hobby. We're all passionate about it. It's inevitably going to be emotional. Rather than shutting down those emotions, use those emotions to your advantage to streamline your review process. Moving it on to foregoing learnings. People worry about missing learnings from a review. Don't sweat it. You're going to play thousands upon thousands of games within your league journey. Just take 2 or 3 things from your given VOD and move on. Our brain can't take in that many new pieces of information. If you're sitting there and trying to analyze, 20, 15, 25 different things, it's just not going to sink in. It's okay to move away from a VOD knowing that maybe there are some still learnings in the VOD. Maybe there are so many things you could spend in that review. That's okay. Let go, move on, play another game. Reps, simply getting in reps in League of Legends is very, very, very important. And this ties back to the sustainability aspect of the journey as well, right? Again, even if there were maybe 15, 20 things you could take away from that game, you need to be okay with taking 2 or 3 because that's the more sustainable approach. And also, burnout from reviewing is very real, making the game feel unfun. I've seen many people lose fun with their league journey, or they just don't feel satisfied anymore because they've spent so much time in the review that they just don't feel motivated to play anymore, and they don't feel curious anymore. So I've seen this way too many times. Keep your process very sustainable. It's okay to move on from a review. The next one here is perspective shift. When improving upon things such as threat assessment, skill shots, positioning in fights, trading, etc., you will get extreme value from asking yourself the following questions. Number 1, if I was them, what would I do? Or if I was in their shoes, why would I make that decision? League is fundamentally a game of anticipation. If we can't understand why they are doing what they're doing, then how the hell are we going to outperform them? How the hell are we going to be able to outplay them? How are we going to be able to manage this scenario? It's just impossible. If you're relying on reactions instead of anticipation, League of Legends is a basically impossible game because there is too many things coming at you. So in order to improve our levels of anticipation, we need to understand the game through other people's lenses. So let's go ahead and take a look at an example utilizing this process. So here is a scenario of me in that same game playing Hui into LeBlanc. And you'll see in a moment, I'm kind of mindlessly shoving here. Well, not mindlessly trying to do a 2-wave cycle, I believe, poking this LeBlanc. And then what ends up happening is that the Viego comes from behind me over here and ends up ganking me. Now, when you review this, a lot of people have the tendency to be like, oh, okay, gosh darn it, my warding and leaning wasn't good enough. Or they'll say something about like, what they should have done like immediately. It's like they'll just put an instant label on it. Oh, yep, wasn't warding and leaning. That's it. Move on. Boom, boom, boom. Go to the next thing. In reality, yes, sure, you can get value from doing that. I'm not saying it's useless. But if I really want to understand this, if I really want to prevent this from happening again, I need to look at this from both of their lenses. If I was this Viego, why would I commit? Like, what makes this a very kind of sexy gank? What makes this a very appealing gank from Viego's perspective? Well, okay, I'm an immobile mage, right? LeBlanc has really good gank setup and has a way to get out all of my CC. So that's 2 things. And then also, LeBlanc is 6, which is worth noting. Udyr's counter ganking is very underwhelming and is probably clearing camps because of the champ's identity. And on top of that, look at where the wave is. The wave is in a very compromised position. It's definitively on LeBlanc's side, so I'm quite overextended and far away from the tower. And so, looking at it, ticking all those boxes and looking at it from those lenses, it's a no-brainer. It looks incredibly obvious. So now that I understand this situation more, now that I actually have a more refined understanding of the amount of threat that I was under, it's going to be easier for me to change my behavior moving forward into similar situations versus these sorts of combinations. Now, I could go through this process with LeBlanc. Okay, if I was LeBlanc, why would I call for this? Maybe LeBlanc called for it. It's like, okay, well, LeBlanc's getting shit on in the 1v1, can't beat me in the 1v1. So she has to call for assistance. That is kind of part of her champ's identity, right? So she's really good at mid jungle 2v2. So this is a play that is completely aligned with LeBlanc's identity as a champion. So that makes sense as well. So a lot of people won't know how to, or don't spend the time looking at it from other people's perspectives. And that really leads to them getting in a rut and not really being able to change their behavior in the long run. In the next one here, we have learning objectives. Now, I've noticed many people are obsessed with the idea of in-game learning objectives. Learning objectives such as focusing on timing trades with last hits, ensuring I'm warding and leaning on every single wave, paying attention to my jungler's location. If you were to set yourself, say, these 3 in-game learning objectives, your brain is going to implode. It's impossible to play the game of League of Legends and do your job while also balancing multiple in-game learning objectives. This is way too much. When it comes to in-game learning objectives, you basically have 2 choices. Number 1, review these scenarios in the post-game instead and internalize the mistakes utilizing the micro macro framework, which is completely fine and completely okay. Or set one and only one in-game learning objective to ensure that your mental stack doesn't implode. Now, look, if your learning objective in-game are things that are tied to lull states, well, that's not too bad because lull states, you're not really in the action. But even then, I try to avoid setting multiple in-game learning objectives as much as humanly possible. Out-of-game learning objectives are fine because you can actually take the time to look at that in the post-game. It's not going to overwhelm your in-game mental stack. But I've had so many clients say, oh, I'm working on this. And I'm like, dude, how the hell are you going to improve all of that at once while playing the game of League of Legends? It's just not feasible. So one in-game learning objective at a time is all that you really want to do. Now, really just concluding everything, guys, reviewing is a skill. You don't just randomly overnight understand how to review and get it, and then you're a master at it. No, it took me years. It literally took me years to get good at reviewing. And for most people, it's going to take the same. So understand that it is a skill. Have a crack. It's not going to be perfect. It's going to be messy. It's going to be underwhelming, and manage those expectations. Don't overcomplicate it. Hopefully, you can take 1 or 2 things away from this video. Otherwise, I'll see you guys for another one. Cheers, guys.